First Peter chapter 4, verse 1. For as much then as YAHAWASHI has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah YAHAWASHI. The name of this lesson is called The Agony and Trials of YAHAWASHI. We're coming into some very trying times, and it's, and as exciting as it is, and as exciting as it does get, when you do think about the end, and you think about the salvation and the deliverance, it's also going to get harder and harder, the closer we get to the end. And how do we know that? Because YAHAWASHI went through the same situations, and he's the son of the Most High, the second spirit created, the second in command in the whole universe and everything. And he had to go through the trials and tribulations that he went through, even so much that at one point he thought that the Most High forsook him, because he was in a bitter agony, And I know brothers go through situations, where sometimes it feels like you're going out of your mind, and pretty much, that's a requirement in this truth, because that's pretty much how you show your faith, when you in a situation where you have to make certain decisions, and you have to bite down, and endure whatever comes your way. And that's pretty much the mindset of YAHAWASHI. YAHAWASHI had that in his mental Rolodex, so to speak, and he understood that. He understood that he was going to go through all these different things, even from the very beginning when he started his ministry. He already knew about it. That's why he would say certain things to the disciples, and they didn't understand, because they didn't, they thought that he was always going to be there because he was their teacher, he was their mentor. And he taught them many things, and he warned them about many things, but at the time when he was telling them these things, they weren't ready to really receive it. Although they heard what he said, it was stored away for a later date. And then once YAHAWASHI was crucified, and he opened up their understanding to the scriptures and the things that he went through, and he showed them these things, that's when they really fully understood everything that he went through, and things that he was telling them from the beginning. But prior to that, they really didn't understand what he was saying. That's why he would get upset with them and say, are you yet without understanding? When he would break down certain parables or certain things to them. And it was true. They really weren't on the level to understand, because the book was sealed, until YAHAWASHI did the great sacrifice that he did, and broke the seals, and was able to impart unto his disciples that understanding, But the first 3 years that he was with them, physically on the earth, he basically took them through, he pretty much was schooling them, and building them up. And then after the 3-year period, when he was crucified and went back to the Father, they were ready to go from being disciples to being apostles. Now, the word disciple comes from the word discipline, and the word apostle simply means sent away. So they went from being disciplined as children, so to speak, to being on a level to be sent out and sent away to preach the gospel. And you better believe that the 11 apostles with the 12th apostle, Matthias, they weren't sitting around the shack, waiting for somebody else to do the work. They were out there doing the work. And so much that when there were situations that would arise, as far as um, dividing out the money to Israel, those that were speaking the Hebrew language and those that were speaking the Greek language. The Apostle Peter said, "Look, man, we got to go do the work, man. We got to go teach this word. We don't have time to be sitting around and and attending to these tables and sharing out the money to Israel. We got to go out there and do the work." So they were out there doing the work, and you in doing the work, you would think that sometimes things would get easy, or easier, to make our life a little easier so we could, focus on what we have to do, but it gets harder. And that's why a lot of guys, when they come into this truth, they don't really understand what this truth is about. And we say, no matter how many times we say it, they still don't get it. And what happens is they end up becoming offended because they're thinking that, okay, this thing is sweet, but what's happening? Why is it getting bitter? It's because they never took the time to sit down and count the cost of what it takes to be in this knowledge, and pretty much, YAHAWASHI has to be the one to guide us in this thing day by day and sup with us and give us the minerals, to continue on. Otherwise, if the Lord severs that spiritual umbilical cord, you can forget about it, But this is the book of Revelation 10, and I'll start at 8. And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And that's dealing with the Bible. And like the brother Ra'ai, my young Israelite foreigners put Sirach chapter 2. I have that on the list of things to go through, and that's the thing about it. You have to, when you come into this knowledge, you have to count the cost. You have to know why you are involved in what you're involved in, not just because it's a group thing and, my homie, he's down with it, and my friends are down with it, and I see, this movement where you got black men, so-called Puerto Rican men, so-called Native American Indian men coming together. This is a powerful thing, so I'm just going to join. Nah, this is not a fad, man. This is not a gang, this is serious business, and you have to know, and you have to put into your mind what it entails to be in this knowledge. And a lot of guys fall out because, number one, they're not part of the elect, and they never took the time to really find out what this truth is really about, the nuts and bolts of the truth, So it says, and I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. And when it's in your mouth sweet as honey, boy, how sweet it is. But then when that bitterness start kicking in, you're like, oh shit, what the and some guys start looking, for the out, They start looking they start looking for the front door, the back door, the side door, whatever, just to get away from them, the flames of affliction. It says, and I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And that's what happens. Some guys come into this thing, it tastes sweet, but then when it turns bitter, they're like, nah, I want no more parts of this. And then they end up leaving. Some guys endure for a while, as the parable of the sower seed states. And then once, it comes to a certain point, they can't deal with it no more. They move out. This thing, once you come into this thing, this is pretty much like a blood contract, to the death, pretty much, because this is an agreement that we made, pretty much with YAHAWASHI to propagate and teach his word till they come back, and some men have actually died in the truth, and their reward is waiting for them, and we that Barakateh YAHAWASHI is still alive are pushing forward and fighting, to gain that crown, You know, like the scriptures say, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. You know, and that's what we're doing, you know, and that's why we go out on the highways and byways. That's why we do these different lessons, do live shows, you know, on location, in transits, you know, and whatever, you know, you might just be meditating on something and you might want to commit it to video, you know, and you might just commit it to video and then just put it out, you know, as either a lesson to brothers or admonition, you know, or a rebuke, you know, it depends, you know. It says that's right, brother. The brother Mwanga Bar, when the going gets tough, the elect gets going. That's right. All right, so this is Matthew 13:18. Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away that which is sown in his heart. This is he which receives seed by the wayside. But he that receiveth seed in the stony places, the same as he that heareth the word, and anon with joy receiveth it. And then, you know, that's that sweet part. When you first come into this thing, it's sweet. It's just even like when you first meet a new chick, you know, everything at the beginning is so sweet, you know, because the excitement is there. You know, you about to, you know, about to knock it down. You know, you're like, oh man, you know, you're thinking about all kind of stuff, you know, and once you get with the chick, you know, nowadays, back in the days, you used to be able to chill for at least 6 months to a year before the bitch start acting up. But now after like the first week, the bitch start acting up, you know, and then it goes from being this sweet union to bitterness, you know. Then the bitch starts going crazy and wilding out, and you know. So that's the same thing with this truth, you know. When you come into this truth, you know, it's first it's sweet, but then it gets bitter, and a lot of guys out there are not willing to endure the bitterness. Now, you know, sweet without bitter is not a perfect balance, because even in our diets, you know, we have to eat certain things that are sweet, and we have to eat certain things that are bitter, certain things that are sour, you know, a certain salt, you know, salts for certain, you know, certain things, for minerals and, you know, things that help our body stay alkaline. Well, with the truth, it's the same thing. You have to have your bitter moments. You have to have your sweet moments. You know, mostly it's going to be bitter moments, you know, but you will have those, you know, moments in where the Lord will give us a little relief, you know. So, but the bitterness is what keeps us focused on the mission, you know, because Apostle Gabar always uses this one term, comfort is the enemy. And that's the truth. You know, a lot of guys get comfort. They get in this comfort zone and they don't want to move from that comfort zone, you know, because they know that they're afraid that if they move from that comfort zone, the bitterness is coming. But the bitterness has already told us that it was going to come, you know. And with, like I said, I'm going to read that in the book of Ecclesiastes, the 2nd chapter, Ecclesiasticus, which the brother already put on the comment board. Yeah, the brother GMS, the Car Your Faith, Acts 14:22, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith. And that's an exhortation to continue in the faith. And that's why videos like this are done, you know, by the apostles, elders, and brothers of Great Millstone, because there's a balance to everything, you know. You can't always just everything just be like, oh, you know, you know, bullshit, you know. The white man, fuck the white man. Yeah, fuck the white man, of course. But there's nuts and bolts to this knowledge and this truth that are gonna keep you grounded if you understand and accept it and know it, you know. But ultimately, like I said, you know, YAHAWASHI has to be the one to actually lead us in that direction. So continuing on, it says, and exhorting them to continue in the faith. Why? Because hard times are coming. The Apostle Paul said it best. He said, the time, perilous times shall come. And we're coming into those perilous times. We really haven't gone into the perilous times yet, but we're fast approaching them, because the time of Jacob's trouble is not here yet, but it's coming. You know, it's on its way. It's well on its way, you know, and it could break out any day, you know. And so all these different little trials and tribulations that we go through in our daily lives, basically what it's doing is numbing us to the hell that's coming. It's just like when you go on a construction site and they hand you a shovel and tell you to dig. If you have no gloves on, you start digging. The first day your hands are all hurting, cut up, raw, because your hands are not used to digging with that shovel, and you're hitting rocks, and your hands are hurting, and then at night you go home, you hurt, and you try to soak your hand, you try to find some relief. But after a while of you digging with that shovel and your hands getting broken up, they start calluses start growing over it, to where when you pick up the shovel, being a veteran now at it, you digging and nothing's hurting you. Why? Because there's calluses on your hands. Well, that's the same thing with this truth. The Lord bring us through a series of tribulations and a series of trials, and after a while, our spirit starts becoming like a callus, because we're I guess, for lack of better words, battle hardened, and that's what the Lord is doing. That's what the scriptures say: despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, for whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and rebuketh often. Why? Because these things that are coming, you basically you got to be a soldier, and being a soldier, you're not gonna be able to. You gotta get in your mind and prepare your mind for hardship, pretty much, and that's what's coming. And a lot of guys are not prepared for that hardship. It says, and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of the Most High. And that is true. So we're going through the tribulation process, or the tribulation period, but it hasn't really gotten to the point where it's going to get to, and it's going to get crazy out here now in Baltimore. Over the last couple of weeks, there was some situations going out there where this cop got killed, which I found out later he was actually a detective. And what was happening was they were looking for the killers, but they haven't found anybody yet, so far as I know. And I had ran across a couple of articles that I sent to the brother Pashai in Baltimore, and pretty much the last one I sent them was that the guy that they killed, which was a detective, they set him up to be killed because he was about to bring out some information, on the agency, or whatever the case was, But regardless of all of that, Baltimore was on lockdown. They were pretty much under martial law, for, I don't know if they're still under that, but I know for about a period of at least a good 4 to 5 days, they were on lockdown, So that just shows you that a small little incident like that, or a big incident in different parts of America, can have America just be shut down just like that, with checkpoints and everything, So it's very possible for this thing just to break out overnight. So what's happening now is we pretty much is going through the leading up to it, the situations that we find ourselves in, and we have to count ourselves blessed, even though sometimes it feels like you just on edge, and like your mind's just all like fucked up, for lack of better words. We have to really count our blessings and praise YAHAWASHI that he got us walking down this path and preparing our minds for what's coming. Because like the scriptures say, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times and strength of salvation. And what better way than to actually be in the fire, dealing with the fire, so that when the other fire comes, we'll be somewhat prepared, for what's coming, But it says, but back in Matthew 13:20, but he that received the seed into stony places, the same as he that heareth the word and anon with joy receiveth it, yet hath he not rooted himself, but dureth for a while. See? So you have certain guys that will endure for a while. For when tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, by and by he is offended. So what happens when he's offended? He leaves. Why? Because he can't deal with that fire. Which means he never really prepared his mind, which really goes back to one thing: he wasn't part of the elect, and that's what it really boils down to. But he didn't prepare his mind. He didn't. The Lord YAHAWASHI didn't sup with him enough to show him, the the things that were going to happen. All right. Now I had some other I had another precept that came into mind, but it left right now, so it's Lord's will it'll come back. But pretty much, like I said, the name of the lesson is the agony and trials of YAHAWASHI, and we pretty much got to prepare ourselves for that. And that's why I started off with 1 Peter 4:1. For as much then as YAHAWASHI has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. So this suffering that we're going through is pretty much a purging process that the Lord is bringing us through. And YAHAWASHI, when he came on the scene, he came on the scene perfect. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't break no law. He didn't do nothing wrong. He was perfect. But the trials and tribulations he was going through was to purge him of past sins when he was here in the flesh as other men, such as Adam, King Solomon, And when you bring that point out to people, they can't receive that because they don't understand about reincarnation, And if they do somewhat understand reincarnation, they'll say that's a heathen custom, which is not. There's nothing heathenistic about reincarnation. Reincarnation is all throughout the scriptures if the Spirit of the Lord is working with you, So it says that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of the Most High. And when we come into this truth, we're pretty much dead to the world. Let me just pull that up real quick. This is the book of Romans, the 6th chapter. I'll start at the first verse. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Because when the Lord brought us into this truth, into this knowledge, we found out that we're not really under the curse of the law, which is death. We found grace in YAHAWASHI and the great sacrifice that he made for us. So we found grace, But just because we found that grace doesn't mean that we go out and willfully do whatever the hell we want to do, Because the scriptures say, use not your liberty as a cloak of maliciousness, So understanding that we have grace when we do fuck up, so to speak, excuse my language, we do have hope that the Lord won't put us to death and that he'll, forgive us, but that's as far as it goes. Don't be using that, the liberty card, at liberty, Says the Most High forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? So we're dead to sin, not because of ourselves, because we still go off. We're still under the law of sin. We still go off, but through YAHAWASHI, our sins are covered. It says, know ye not that so many of us as were baptized into YAHAWASHI, Hamashiach, were baptized into his death. And we're dead to the world. It says, therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death. So right now we're dead to the world through the baptism of YAHAWASHI and the miracles and the great sacrifice that YAHAWASHI made. And we're alive in that, but we're dead to the world. It said that like as YAHAWASHI was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. And we are walking in newness of life, because when the day that we heard the word and understood it and got involved, our old man died and a new man came to life. And when a new man came to life, our new man is walking, trying to walk the righteous path to the best of our ability. And what happens with that is you're going to have all different types of demons and different things coming against you, coming against us to try to throw us off the track. And that's what was going on with YAHAWASHI. When YAHAWASHI was walking that walk that he had to walk, there was every demon in hell was trying to get him off the path. So much that where is it? Right here, Matthew 4:1. Then was YAHAWASHI led up of the spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Now the tempter was tempting him, but now was the tempter tempting Yahawashi when he was in his like full strength? You know, when he was married, you know, when he was all uh, um good to go, you know, when nothing was bothering him. No, he came to him when he was at his weakest point. You know, he came to him when he was at his weakest point. And we go through times like that. You know, brothers at all. You know, everybody gets weak at times. You know, everybody gets, you know, the depression demon. You know, all kind of shit just be fucking with you. You just having the worst day of your life. You know, we all go through that. You know, but the thing about it is, those are the times to bite down. You know, those are the times to pray, you know, and we should always pray all the time. Apostle Rakal is heavy on pushing that about prayer, you know, but especially in those times, you know, I mean, but we should always be praying to the Lord Yahweh Shemel to give us the strength to endure whatever is coming our way, you know, but, you know, in those times also, it's important to pray. So we all go through them situations, and it's at that. And then at those moments where you're going through all of that, then them demons will come and say, see, you're not a man of the Lord. Because a man of the Lord when we're going through this stuff, you know? So it's just all kind of shit that'll go through your mind, you know, to like pretty much fuck with you. And like the brother put, GMS Zakar your faith, 2 Timothy 3:12, yea, and all that will live godly in Yahawashi shall suffer persecution. And that's true. GMS 144, spiritual food, Sirach 15:20. He hath commanded no man to do wickedly, neither hath he given any man license to sin. And that's the truth, you know. So we do have grace, but that's not a license to sin, as a brother put, and that's true. You know, that doesn't give you the right just to go ahead and do whatever the hell you want to do, you know, because at the end of the day, the Lord Yahweh Bashem El Shai, you know, did that for us. So when we do fuck up, that we have a way back, so to speak, or that we have forgiveness or remission of sins, not just to go ahead and just do whatever the hell we want to do. Brother Ra'ib, my Israelite foreigner, or Rob, First Peter 1:7, that the trial of your faith being much more precious than of gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Yahawashi. And that's true, you know, because these trials that we're going through, these are trials of Yahweh Bashem Yahawashi, you know. And if we fail these trials, then the Lord is gonna be like, this guy, he ain't ready, you know, we can't use this guy, you know. So this is the reason why understanding this truth and understanding what we're going through is so important, because it helps keep you grounded through the spirit, you know. Yeah, come GMS 13 rulership, Ecclesiasticus 5:4. Say not, I have sinned, and what harm hath happened unto me? For the Lord is long suffering; he will in no wise let thee go. Concerning propitiation, be not without fear to add sin unto sin. And that's true, because the Lord, sin is not going to go unpunished. You know, the Lord is going to deal somehow, some way. The Lord is going to get you. You know. So going back to Matthew 4:2, and when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. So Yahawashi was hungry after these 40 days, and throughout the whole process of him going through that fast, the devil was messing with him. You know, was tempting him, was bothering him, was fucking with him at his lowest point. And then when he came to the lowest point, you know, which is after the 40 days, when you weak, you know, at the end of the fast, it says, and when the tempter came to him, he said, if thou be the Son of the Most High, command these stones that they be made bread. You know, and how did Satan come to the Lord? With the scriptures, you know, and then them demons will mess with you like that. But it's, you know, that's why we pray daily that the Lord don't take his Holy Spirit away from us. So when these things come up, when you have these different philosophies that are coming up, these different nuts that are coming up with their bullshit, we cut it with the scriptures. It says, but he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of the Most High. Now, keep in mind that this was at a very low point in Yahawashi's suffering. It says, then the devil taketh him up into the holy city and setteth him on the pinnacle of the temple and saith unto him, if thou be the son of the Most High, see, if thou be the son of the Most High, trying to put doubt into Yahawashi's mind. You know, it says, cast thyself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning thee. Once again, coming what? With the scriptures. And in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. It says, Yahawashi saith unto him, it is written again, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy power. It says again, and then Yahawashi did what? Came back with the scripture, you know, hit him, you know, and voided them out, so to speak, you know, with the scripture. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. You know, all these different empires that you've seen that came up from that time Yahawashi was on the earth all the way up until today. He showed him all the glory and the splendor of these kingdoms, and saith unto him, all these things will I give thee if thou fall down and worship me. See? So I'm going to give you all of this if you fall down and worship me, which shows you that these people that make it in this society, in this world, they have to bow down to Satan and do Satan's will, you know? And you have people out here, even among a Great Millstone, even among these other different camps, that don't believe that, you know, that think that, you know, this is just a joke. You know, you got guys that call themselves Israelites that don't believe that, you know, and the thing about it is they're sadly mistaken, you know, because these things are real. You know, these people you see that's up high up in this society that's making money, especially Jake, they done sold out. They had to do things, you know, to get to that position and to keep that position, you know, because once you do something for this devil and you sell out, you got to keep selling out. It ain't a thing of just a one-shot deal. You have to keep selling out. If you brothers out there that want a good example of that, watch the movie Needful Things. You know, in the movie Needful Things, you had this kid that came in the store, which pretty much was run by the devil, Leland Gaunt, and there was this coveted thing that he wanted, which was a Mickey Mantle a card, baseball card that was signed to Brian, to the guy that the boy's name was Brian, you know, and he only had like a few cents, maybe a quarter, couple of nickels, a dime, and some pennies, was not even nearly enough to buy that collectible item. And so what Leland Gaunt did, say, oh, don't worry about it. Let's see what you got here, you know. He said, okay, well, you could just do me a favor. You know, he took the few cents that he had and he said, you got to do me a favor. You got to do this, that, and the other. So when he did that, he got his card. But then afterwards, he came to him again. He said, look, man, you're not done. Because he said, you got to do something else. He said, well, I already did everything you said for me to do. He said, well, look, you're not finished doing what I tell you to do until I tell you you're finished. You know, so pretty much when I saw that scene, I thought about, you know, like whenever you sell out to the devil, you got to keep doing things in this society. And that's why Jake does it, because they don't want to go through the hell, through the tribulation. It's always about getting out of that situation that they are, whether it's in the ghetto or the barrio or wherever, on the res, you know. And they always do things, but they think that it's just a one-shot deal. It's not a one-shot deal. All right, it says, then saith Yahweh unto him, get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy power, and him only shalt thou serve. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him. Why? Because he was at his weakest point when he was battling Satan. You know, the brother number 1 Gabar, James 4:7, submit yourself therefore to the Most High, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And that's true, you know. But if you just sit there and mulling it, you know, and just allow Satan just to get the best of you, he gonna be there slapping you around, you know, till you get tired and just jump up and say, you know what, man, fuck, you know, and then just pretty much curse him out in your mind with the truth, with the scriptures, you know. GMS Zakaria, faith, 1 Thessalonians 3:3, that no man should be moved by these afflictions, for yourselves know that we are appointed thereunto. Wow, that's a bad scripture, brother. You know, and that's true. That's true, man. You know, that's true, man. That's and the thing about it is these are the things that we were appointed to. That's why it's important to count the cost. And counting the cost means you have to know about everything, not just okay, break this scripture down. Because a lot of guys, they like to go to the Revelation breakdowns to show how deep they are. The Daniel breakdowns and the Genesis breakdowns and the wow, look at me, look how I'm breaking these scriptures down. But then when it comes to like little minute things, or little things, that are very important in the scriptures, they fail miserably, because they're not grounded, they're not rooted. Their thing is about shining. You got guys that come into this thing because they want to get a fame that they couldn't get when they were in the world. So they bring that same mentality into this thing, and it doesn't work like that. You have to put off the old man and put on the new man. All right, so now, all right, so we read that, already read that. All right, so so you know what? Let me just go ahead. I have pulled this up because this is the best example that I can give. This is a movie called Color of the Cross, which you should be able to find this movie. I think there's 2 parts to it. I never really watched it. I mean, I just saw some of the scenes where this character here, this individual played the Lord, which is a closer depiction of the Lord, even though the Lord had, he had all white hair by the age of 33. But this is a closer image to the Lord. And even he has a crown of thorns, he got blood on him and everything. It still isn't enough to explain or to give what's the word I'm looking for? To do justice to what YAHAWASHI looked like. Matter of fact, before I read anything else, let me go here to Isaiah 52:13. Behold, my servant shall deal prudently. He shall be exalted and extolled and be very high. This is dealing with YAHAWASHI. As many were astonished at thee, his visage was so marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. So his visage, meaning his face. Let's see, mara'ah, sight, appearance, vision. Sight, phenomenon, spectacle, appearance, vision. What is seen, a vision, supernatural, sight, vision, power of seeing. So mara'ah, ma at the beginning of a word is of or from, and ra'ah is to see. So mara'ah is like a vision or appearance. Okay, so his appearance, his face, his appearance was so marred. Now let's look up the word marred. Mashakath, disfigurement of face, corruption. See, so his face was disfigured. I mean, the only best example that can kind of show that would be the picture of Emmett Till. This would be a better depiction. Even though it was worse than this, but this is of more of how the Lord looked after they beat him down. Because if you look at this guy here, his face is not swelled up. I mean, he got some blood on him, crown of thorns. And you go scroll through the different pictures. That's not really doing justice to what the Lord really went through. Even here, he looks beat up, pretty beat up, but this is nothing in comparison to what the Lord looked like. This will be a little bit more of a better depiction, because when boxers go in the ring and they fight 12 rounds, which is the standard today, afterwards they're all lumped up, they have all kind of bruises, they're bleeding, so you could just imagine the hell that he went through. But that was because it was prophesied that it was going to go down like that. So marred means disfigurement of face, corruption, so it says, as many as were astonished at thee, his visage was so marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. So he was so bruised up and so beat up that he was unrecognizable, and when we read, which we're going to read in Isaiah 53, he went through that, and he was not a comely thing to look at. Because when you look at somebody that's beat up, you like what they looked like before, and you see them when they all beat up and scarred up, be like, God damn, man, what happened to you? That's how they were looking at Yahawashi. Because he was totally different from what he was. And you got to remember that as he's going through these things, and he's going through the different levels of it, he from the previous from the day before, when he was with the disciples and prepping for the Passover and all that, you got to remember he didn't have no sleep. He was drinking wine that evening, that night. So pretty much, he was thirsty. He was hungry. He was tired. He just wanted to go lay down, go to sleep. And he had to go through all this shit and deal with all these fucking clowns, that call themselves men of the Lord and all that, and to have to deal with all of that and still have to maintain that faith and that devotion to the Most High and to continue on. That takes a hell of a character, man. And that's how I want to be. I'm pretty sure you brothers want to be like that. That no matter what, we forge on and continue moving forward, man. That nothing can stop us, from pushing this word forward, man. And these are things that a lot of guys are not taking into consideration. They're not counting the cost. And when shit gets hard, they bail out. That's what we pray daily, that the Lord don't take his Holy Spirit away from us. It says, so shall he sprinkle many nations, because you have Israelites that are scattered throughout the four corners of the world. The kings shall shut their mouths at him, for that which hath not been told them shall they see, and that which they had not heard shall they consider. And this is at the end. After he goes through all of this, being beat up and all that, at the end, when he comes back, he's gonna come back in majesty, in glory. He went out in the past, through being beat up and being ridiculed and humiliated, and he's coming back in glory to get his glory. And the first ones he's gonna visit is them devils that put him on the cross, as it says in Isaiah Revelation, the first chapter. Matter of fact, let me get that real quick. Revelation 1:7. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so be true. So there's two men right now walking on this earth, whether they be Jakes or Edomites or whatever nation they are, that are in law enforcement, that did this to Yahawashi. And those are the first ones he's coming to get. That's why he said the day of vengeance burneth in my heart. So going back, Isaiah 53:1, who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? And there's a reason why I say Isaiah said this, because the arm of the Lord is Yahawashi. And he's saying, who hath believed our report? Because when you read the Old Testament speaks about Yahawashi all throughout the Old Testament. So he's saying, who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? Because Yahawashi is not revealed to everybody. That's why it says in the book of St. John, 6th chapter, in the 44th verse, it says, no man can come to me except the Father which have sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. So the Most High has to be the one to draw us to Yahawashi. And then Yahawashi said, I will raise him up at the last day. It says, it is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of the Most High. Every man therefore that hath heard and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me. See? So the only way you can come to Yahawashi is if the Most High actually taught you and drew you to Yahawashi. That's why Yahawashi told Peter, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood had not revealed this unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. And then let's go to the same book, John 15:16. It says, ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit shall remain, that whatsoever you shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it you. And this truth is a thing of constant endurance, constant endurance, constant endurance, you know. And the endurance part, when you're training and you go through rigorous training, your endurance builds up, your stamina builds up. You know, that's why when you see boxers that are winded, all out of breath, you know, after the first few rounds, is because they didn't train properly. You know, they weren't in the gym, you know, running, hitting the bag and all that. They were bullshitting. That's why they're out of breath and out of shape. You know, so pretty much when we go through this pummeling of tribulation, pretty much that's the Lord getting us ready for these things that are coming. You know, but sometimes, you know, being in this hell, you know, and you find a little pocket of comfort, you want to stay in that pocket. But the like the Apostle Gabar always says, comfort is the enemy, you know. So it's better to be beaten up through the spirit and be prepared and ready when that day comes and all hell breaks loose and we be strong, than to fall in that pocket of comfort and just stay in that pocket of comfort, and then when that day comes, you fold up like a little bitch, you know. So there's a reason why the Lord said, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, for whom he loveth he chasteneth and rebuketh often. And YAHAWASHI is his son, his only begotten son, his firstborn. And it pleased him to do that to him, which we're going to read. So how much more us, you know, which are not on nowhere near the level of YAHAWASHI. You know, we're on a low level. And it pleased the Most High that bruised his son. So how much more us? YAHAWASHI said the servant is not greater than his master. So going back, Isaiah 53:2, for he shall grow up before him in a tender plant, as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He have no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Why? Because he was beat down, as we read in he was disfigured. As we read in Isaiah, the 52nd chapter, the previous chapter to this, he was disfigured from getting beat down. They were punching him, spitting on him, slapping him, putting the crown of thorns on him, you know. So it said that he was more marred and more disfigured than any man. So this right here with Emmett Till, this really doesn't do any justice to how YAHAWASHI looked, you know, when he was put up on the cross. You know, and then you got to remember they stuck him with a spear in his side. You know, it's all kind of stuff, man. You know, they put those nails, the iron spikes through his feet and his hands. You know, it says verse 3, he is despised and rejected of men, and a lot of men rejected YAHAWASHI, and a lot of men reject YAHAWASHI to this very day. You know, even guys in Great Millstone. You know, they're out there talking all that bullshit, but really deep down inside, they rejected YAHAWASHI. You know, and that's why after a while you see certain guys segue and moving their way out, leaving, because they never really accepted YAHAWASHI. They never really were part of this. You know, that's what the scriptures speak about, men that are crept in unawares. A man of sorrows. And then when you look up this word sorrows, it's dealing with sorrows also. But when you look up this word sorrow, maka abba, pain, sorrow, pain, physical pain, mental. So it's mental pain and physical pain, which leads to what? To sickness. You know, grief, pain, sickness, because grief of mind leads to sickness of body. You know, like when you watch the movie The Godfather Part 3, when Michael was speaking to the bishop or cardinal or priest, whatever the hell he was, and he was all messed up. He needed a glass of orange juice and some candy or something. He had to sit down, and then he was telling them about certain things. He said, the priest looked at him. He said the mind worries and the body suffers for it. So grief of mind breaks your body down, and we are under constant attack mentally, you know, from all these different shit that's going on that you have to deal with, that you have to look at every day. You know, that's what the scriptures say them that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. You know, it's a vexation. And when you get vexed, and when you get pissed off, and when you're sorrowful or depressed or whatever, that all takes toll on the body. So Yahawashi was going through all of that stuff, you know. So it says that was for the word of man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Now, when you look up the word grief, chalaya, it means sickness, disease, you know, malady, anxiety, calamity, disease, grief, sick or sickness, because the stress of the mind leads to the breaking down of the body, the sickness of the body, you know. And that's why, you know, we all have different infirmities that we're dealing with, battling, you know, and still have to teach the word on top of everything else. So you got to remember, Yahawashi was going through all of these things. You know, he wasn't just in the epitome of health and just walking around and just, you know, happy every day. You know, so I'm just can't wait to get to that cross. You know, as Apostle Gabar always, you know, brings out from time to time. You know, so it says a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, sicknesses, and we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised and we esteemed him not. And then a lot of people did not esteem Yahawashi. They disdained him. They looked down on him, you know, because he didn't come up. He wasn't in a prestigious thing. They would think that when Yahawashi came back, they read about the glorious way he was going to come, but they didn't read about the humility that he was going to come with first. And the scriptures say before honor is humility. So he came in a humble way, even when he was brought into Jerusalem on an ass's colt. You know, he came lowly, as it says in Zechariah. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. And on top of all of that, that he dealt with, he carried our griefs and our sorrows. That's why the Apostle Paul said, you know, that he all the stuff that he went through, the perils and the false brethren and the shipwreck and famine and, you know, all of that stuff that he went through, you know, he said the one thing that bothered him even more was the care of the church daily that came upon him, and making sure that the church was straight, that brothers were straight, that they wasn't bugging out and going off, you know. And that's why he was constantly getting on them and trying to keep them on that straight and narrow path, you know. And so much that they would get upset and uncomfortable with Paul. And that's why he said, the more I love thee, the less I be loved. You know, he wasn't doing that to be an asshole, so to speak. He was doing that pretty much because he cared, and he had a great jealousy for the church, that he didn't want nothing to stain it. You know, after all the work that he put in, to get them to walk on the right path through the spirit of Yahawashi. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of the Most High, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. And this is the reason why. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, because the Most High had took his peace away from us. When you read the book of Jeremiah, he took his peace from us. So Yahawashi had to come back and bring peace between the Most High and us. And with his stripes, we are healed, and we were healed by his stripes. You know, that's why we have to understand the things that Yahawashi was going through up until his very last moment when he was put on the cross and he gave up the spirit. And so much that he felt that the Most High forsook him. You know, because in his mind, you know, this is what the flesh does. In his mind, he was like, man, how could this be? You know, I did everything the Lord wanted me to do. I did everything the Most High wanted me to do. You know, why did you forsake me? But he wasn't forsaken, you know, and you know, and sometimes you feel that way, you know, sometimes you do feel that way, like the Lord is forsaking you. But that's, like I said, these are times like this when we have to bite down, you know, and push that stuff to the side and say, look, we got a mission, and we got to finish that mission. It says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. You know, because he had to pay for what we did. You know, that's why he ain't coming back down here again. That the scriptures say he would have to keep continually coming back down here. You think he's gonna go through that shit again? One time is enough. You think you're gonna keep coming down here again and again and again, year after year? You know, age after age to do that what he did, that sacrifice he did? Hell no, he ain't coming back down here. He did it once and that's it. Those that didn't get it then are not gonna get it now. But the beautiful thing about it is, even those that are destroyed here of Israel will come back in the kingdom and be righteous again. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter. And you read about that in the New Testament. And as a sheep before the shearers, her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And he was in the judgment hall. He was before Pontius Pilate. He was in prison. For those guys that say, well, where in the scriptures does it say that the prophets are going to be in prison? Well, YAHAWASHI himself was in prison and brought before the judgment hall. And who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. You know, and that's the reason why YAHAWASHI went through what he went through. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. See, so the grave with the wicked, because you had two malefactors, you know, which were criminals that were crucified next to him, and then after he after he died, I believe it was Joseph of Arimathea that came and begged for his body, and he laid him in a sepulcher that was made for him. So it was a rich sepulcher, you know, for a rich man. But he didn't realize, Joseph didn't realize that when he built that sepulcher, that sepulcher was going to be for the Lord, for YAHAWASHI, you know, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord Yahweh to bruise him. See, so when he was marred more than the sons of men, when he was all in that jacked up state, you know, said it pleased the Lord to bruise him. See, it says he hath put him to grief when thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin. And that's what happened. He made that body that he had an offering for sin. It says he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord Yahweh B'Shem YAHAWASHI shall prosper in his hand. You know, because YAHAWASHI, the promise was that he would get the kingdom, but he had to do this one sacrifice, you know. And then when he did the sacrifice and went back to the father said, you know, sit here on my right hand until I make thy enemies thy footstool. And that's what YAHAWASHI is waiting for. That's why it says that the day of vengeance is burning in his heart, and he's saying that pretty much that the day of vengeance is burning in his heart. Oh, and that he will not meet thee as a man. He shall see of the travail of his soul and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. And that's talking about the elect, all of Israel eventually, but the elect right now. But then in the kingdom, the rest of Israel that doesn't make it on this side are going to make it through the elect. It says, therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong. You know, because, you know, if you have a kingdom, you have to have subjects and a people to enjoy the kingdom with. I mean, what good is to have a great kingdom and you're just there by yourself, you know? So he did this great sacrifice for us, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. All right, now moving on. Matthew 26:1. And it came to pass, when YAHAWASHI had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, you know that after 2 days is the feast of Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. See, so he was getting ready to be crucified. All right, now jumping down. I mean, if you brothers want, you could read. You could read this, the whole chapter, chapters 26 and 27 in Matthew, and in the other gospels too, they go into it. But this is the 36th verse. Then cometh Yahawashi with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto his disciples, Sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. So he was sorrowful and very heavy, and all this stuff was going on. And the scriptures don't go into every little detail, but knowing that when he fasted for the 40 days and 40 nights, when he was hungered, Satan came tempting him in his mind. Well, actually, he came physically to him, so that them demons was messing with him in his mind, because he was sorrowful and very heavy, exceeding sorrowful, and then this was around the time when they were getting ready to come and grab him up and do all that other stuff to him. So he was in a deep state of grief even before they grabbed him up, and that was all the Most High doing that to prepare him for what was coming, and what we're going through now, the sufferings that we're going through now, is basically building us up for when that time comes, Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here and watch with me. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. That's why it pretty much is the will of the Most High that's going to stand at the end. It says, and he cometh unto the disciples and findeth them asleep, and saith unto, because remember, they were tired, man. You got to remember, this is after a night of the Passover, preparing all day long, eating. They already ate the food, they drank the wine, they were tired, and they was falling asleep. And Yahawashi wanted to go lay down somewhere too, but this was his temptation. This was the time when he was about to suffer what he came into the world to suffer. So you got to keep all this in mind. He was going through all of this, and this isn't even all the way to the next day. This is just leading up to it. And saith unto Peter, What, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And another one, it said that their eyes were very heavy. After you eat a good meal, you sometimes you want to go lay down and catch some Z's. He went away again the second time and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me except I drink it, thy will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. See? And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then cometh he to his disciples and saith unto them, Sleep on now and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, it is at hand that he is at hand that doth betray me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he, hold him fast. And forthwith he came to Yahawashi and said, Hail, master, and kissed him. And Yahawashi said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Yahawashi and took him. And behold, one of them which were with Yahawashi stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. Then said Yahawashi unto him, Put up again thy sword to his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? Because Yahawashi had the power to give up his life, and Yahawashi had the power to take it again. Bear with me 1 second, brothers. So he had that power to do that because the Most High gave it to him. So imagine going through all of this sorrow and all this hell and having the power to stop it, you know? And I'm pretty sure he was tempted to do it, but he didn't do it because he had a mission. And he said the Father's will was to be done, not his will. Okay. So it says, but how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled that thus it must be? See, because he was about his Father's business, man. You know, so that's why he didn't stop, because he said, you know what, I have to do this because this is what was required of me, and the scriptures have to be fulfilled. So in order for all these things to happen and for the kingdom to come, everything that's written has to be fulfilled. That's what the scriptures speak about, hastening the day, you know, desiring to see one of the days of the Son of Man, you know. So it says, in that same hour said YAHAWASHI to the multitudes, are you come out again as against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you laid no hold on me. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled, because this was all part of the deal. It says, smite the shepherd and the sheep shall scatter. And they that had laid hold on YAHAWASHI led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and elders were assembled. So you have these men that's supposed to be of prestige. Now they you know, they already want to get their hands on you, and they finally got a chance to get their hands on you, and now they're getting to the business. You know, here it is. Meanwhile, you know, YAHAWASHI was of sorrow of mind and of great grief. You know, and here it is. You got these niggas around him talking shit to him, you know, scrutinizing him, beating him before they bring him over to the goddamn devil. But Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witnesses against YAHAWASHI to put him to death. And not only that, they sought false witnesses because they knew that he was the Son of the Most High. They knew that. That's why after Pontius Pilate examined them, he said, you know, I don't find nothing wrong with this man. You know, and he says because of envy that they delivered him to me. You know, because he knew, because he was a wise judge. He didn't really want nothing to do with him. And even his wife told him, look, have nothing to do with this righteous man. I suffered many things in the dream because of this man. You know, so he knew that he was a righteous man. You know, but as his custom was, you know, he went through the interrogation process, you know, and he found out. He said, nah, this man ain't do nothing wrong. And he was trying to stop them from crucifying him, but this was the will of the Most High. So it's beyond the governors and the rulers and the kings, you know, of that time, because it's the great king of, you know, Yahweh's will that had to be done, and that's why it went down the way it went down. But found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At the last came 2 false witnesses, and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of the Most High, and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? But YAHAWASHI held his peace, and the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living power that thou tell us whether thou be the anointed, the Son of the Most High, which they already knew he was, but they didn't want to believe it. YAHAWASHI said unto him, thou hast said, nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Hey, so YAHAWASHI was bold unto the end, man, regardless of what was going through his mind, man. We have to pray for that mind. That's why I read in the book of Peter, for as much then as YAHAWASHI has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourself likewise with the same mind, for he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. And that's a hell of a mind to have, man. You know, to be able to, you know, in the face of death, still, you know, curse your enemies out. That's a hell of a spirit. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, he hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. What think ye? They answered and said, he is guilty of death. See? So pretty much they sentenced him to death. But they knew that they couldn't put him to death, you know? And So they had to bring him to the proper authorities at the time. Then did they spit in his face. See, now after all of that, going through all this agony, praying in the garden, being betrayed, his disciples leaving him, he's by himself. They questioned him, interrogated him, put a sentence on him. Then now they start spitting in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him with the palm of their hands. You know, and all of this on top of the grief that he was going through and the sorrow that he was going through in his mind, looking for some kind of comfort, you know, to some kind of relief. But the closer it got to him being crucified, the harder it was getting for him, not the easier. Saying, prophesy unto us, thou anointed, who is he that smote thee? And they had the audacity to talk shit to him after while they were hitting him. You know that was niggas, man. Now Peter sat without in the palace, and the damsel came unto him, saying, thou also was with YAHAWASHI of Galilee. But he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. It says, and when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto them that are there, this fellow was also with YAHAWASHI of Nazareth. And again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. Then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of YAHAWASHI, which said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. And he was bitter. But that was all set up that way because he's the head disciple. YAHAWASHI set him back up. But the prophecy said that smite the shepherd and the sheep shall scatter. So all of that had to happen for the scriptures to be fulfilled, you know. But then Peter and the disciples, all of the 11, they all came back, and then they added Mattathias, you know, that took the place of Judas, you know. But it was all set up that way. All right, so Matthew 27:1, when the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against YAHAWASHI to put him to death. And when they had bound him, now he's bound. Now after a night of no sleep, they bound him, you know, beat him, condemned him. They led him away and delivered him unto Pontius Pilate the governor and brought him to the devil. You know, so I'm gonna try to jump around here a little bit. 22. Pilate saith unto them, what shall I do then with YAHAWASHI, which is called the Anointed? They all say unto him, let him be crucified. And the governor said, why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. And that's why you see Jake that went through a lot of situations in this country, you know, with being lynched, you know, and being mainly lynched and being put to death and stuff, because they said, let his blood be on us and our children. Salaki, brothers. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged YAHAWASHI, he delivered him to be crucified. See, and then not only did they beat him down and bound him, Pontius Pilate and them beat him down, you know. Then the soldiers of the governor took YAHAWASHI into the common hall, and you know this was the Romans, but you had Jakes back then that was in the Roman Empire, so it's very possible that some of these soldiers were actual Israelites that took part in this, and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers, and they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe, and when they had platted a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. You know, so pretty much, you know, there's a video on YouTube where this doctor kind of went through explaining the different levels of what Yahawashi was going through and the trauma that he was going through before he actually passed away. And it was horrendous, man. I don't remember the exact name of it. You know, but if brothers type that in on YouTube, then maybe they should be able to find it. And they spit upon him and took the reed and smote him on the head. See? So they were doing all kind of wickedness, man. You know, get rid of this goddamn demon here. Damn, to hear this, we're talking, you know, speaking about times to come, you know, and the hell that Yahawashi went through. You got these goddamn demons talking about some goddamn dating service. It says, and as they came out, Salaki, it says, and after that they had mocked him, they took the robe off from him and put his own raiment on him and led him away to crucify him. And you got to remember, this is all going on with everything that's going on in Yahawashi's mind. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall. And when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture that they cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there, and they were watching him as a spectacle, and set up over his head his accusation written, "This is Yahawashi, the King of the Jews." Then were there two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, and people talking shit to him while he's in this condition, and saying, "Thou that destroys the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself if thou be the Son of the Most High, come down from the cross." Likewise also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders said, "Have he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him." And you know that those are niggas talking shit. He trusted in the Most High, let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, "I am the Son of the Most High." The thieves also which were crucified with him cast the same in his teeth, which was really only one of them that did that. Now from the 6th hour there was a darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Yahawashi cried with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is to say, my power, why hast thou forsaken me?" Because he did everything that the Most High asked of him. So he's saying, "Why are you forsaking me? You know, why does it feel like I'm being forsaken?" But he wasn't, because this was what he had to go through. You know, some of them that stood there, when they heard it, said, "This man calleth for Elias." And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. The rest said, let's see whether Elias will come to save him." Yahawashi, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the spirit. You know, so Yahawashi yielded up the spirit, and that was, you know, and he fulfilled his mission. He finished the work. That's why he's in another, I believe it was another part of the gospel. It says, "It is done." He said, "It is done," meaning everything that the Most High required of him to do, he did it. You know, but he was going through all kind of hell. So the closer this thing gets, the harder it's going to get, you know. And we just got to keep on fighting and praying to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua that he give us the internal fortitude to endure it, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, when the time comes, the Lord is going to give us the power, you know, to endure, you know. So we just got to keep on fighting. You know, so, you know, like that's why the Lord said, "Think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, as if some strange thing happened unto you," because we understand why we're going through these things, you know. So pretty much, you know, that has been, I mean, you could go on and on. That has been the agony and trials of Yahawashi. You know, we have to prepare our minds the same way and get ready for what's coming, you know. And but the Lord, you know, there is hope, you know, because not everybody's going to go, it's going to be a martyr. You're going to have those that are going to be alive and go into the chariots, you know, but we have to speak about these things and get our minds prepared for these things, because these things are coming, and you could see everything way it's coming now, and you could see how everything is playing out, and how any day this whole country could just shut down, and when it shuts down, all bets are off, which we waiting for that, for the Lord to deliver us, and that has to happen before the Lord can deliver us. And Yahawashi had to go through what he went through before the Most High could actually give him that crown. So with that, I hope you brothers have been edified. This is not a fear tactic thing. This is just an exhortation, admonition to brothers. That these are things that we have to consider and think about. And especially in these perilous times that we're coming into. So with that, I hope brothers have been edified. To the next time I say Shalom.